All right, hello, welcome, and here's our second talk for the afternoon. Let me bring up the bio. Opal Symes, who is a Python developer with a background in building websites, online services, who dabbles in system administration in her spare time. She uses Rust and Python to remix APIs. Let's please give Opal a big warm welcome.
Cool. Hi. So obviously this talk's going to cover transgender stuff, so before I begin I just want to point a couple of things out. This talk is going to come from my experiences and talk about stuff from my worldview, which is Anglo-centric, and so if you are dealing with things in this area, I recommend that you seek out Indigenous voices and marginalised voices. Also, transgender people are not a hive mind, despite what some may believe. So different people have different opinions on these things, but I hope that this is kind of a general overview. So, I'm a Python developer and a sewing video enthusiast. I would say I'm a sewing enthusiast, but to be honest, I just watch videos more than I do actual sewing. And I'm also a transgender woman. Yeah. So, transgender is basically, a transgender person is someone who has a gender that is different to one that they were assigned at birth. And cisgender is kind of the opposite. So your gender is the same as the one that you've been assigned at birth. And a transgender person will transition to their actual gender. So I am a woman, and I'm also a transgender woman. So you'll also hear gender diverse, which is a catch-all term for people who aren't cisgender. It's useful because lots of people don't, because non-binary people may not consider themselves to be transgender or under that umbrella, so having a term that actually includes everyone is important, and you'll see that a bit through here, through this talk as well. It's important that we include the voices that are not just the majority. Also LGBTIQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, and queer/questioning. Use it to talk about the group and not the individual. So I'm not LGBT because I'm not a lesbian and I'm not gay. Yeah, it's important that you don't refer to a single individual as being that, because obviously they're not, it doesn't apply. And so sexual orientation is who you love, and gender identity is who you are. Because trans stuff is kind of important in this talk, I figured I'd just mention when someone comes out to you, it's important that you listen to them and that you understand their boundaries. So some people might not be out at work or at home, and you need to make sure that you're not going to out them. But that being said, transgender people don't have to tell you that they're trans. Coming out here is because I feel safe and because it's something I feel like I should do. But other people don't have to, and it shouldn't be forced. Because coming out is risky at times. People are not always accepting, and so coming out is always got to be a decision for the transgender person in question, rather than someone making that decision for them. And in my past, I've had to come out to a couple of people where I didn't feel like I had the choice, and that really is tough. But yeah, ideally you make that they would make that decision for themselves when they want to, without being pushed. So with all that being said, what if we just don't ask for people's gender? Okay, I'm done. But maybe you do actually need to ask for some reason. And the important thing here is how, and also to understand what you're actually asking. Asking for someone's gender is kind of, it's difficult because are you talking about the gender that's on my passport, or are you talking about the gender that's on my driver's license that doesn't even have my gender on it? Or are you using it as a proxy for something else? Like, do you want to be suggested shirts or dresses? Or should we use male, he, him, or she, her pronouns? Like, the question is, yeah. So the other thing that you need to ask before you even ask the question is, will people understand why you're asking it? So if you're asking for my passport gender and you're an airline, I'll go, oh yeah, that makes sense. But if you're a newsletter and you're asking for my gender on my passport, I'm going to go, do you actually need that? And probably not answer that, or just lie, because it's easier. So let's dive right in. So let's start off with the most obvious ones, pronouns. She, her, he, him, they're all very common. They, them has grown in I'm going to say popularity in recent times, but it's not a new thing. It's something that's always been in the English language, and you use it for indeterminate, for people who you don't know what gender they are, and you've done this since you were very young. And there are also newer pronouns that are used by some non-binary people to basically not use one of the three that are available. And to help with this, there's a great website called Pronoun.is. It basically goes through and gives you examples of how to use these pronouns in everyday speech. So, you know, she went to the park, I went with her. They went to the park, I went with them. And Z went to the park, I went with Z. I recommend checking that website out. It's also an open source project, and you can look at the dataset on GitHub. So basically, you go pronoun.is/he, and it will go, oh, you're talking about this particular set of pronouns, and it will build that entire list up for you. Yeah, it's very good. So, on to titles. Why do they even exist? The number of problems you have with titles, and just like, I've seen tweets of people like selecting Mr. and they going, oh yes, you must be a man, or selecting Miss and oh yes, you must be a woman, and it's like, no, that's not how this works, first of all. But like including the gender neutral one, which is mix. I think that's how you pronounce it. I should probably check that. But also, make it easy to change. There's nothing worse than getting letters in the mail 2-3 years after you've transitioned, which still address you as Mr. Because you phoned them up once and they were like, yeah, we're going to need to see some ID for you to change your title. Because why? So, preferences. Obviously, people are not like transgender people are not a hive mind. Women don't all like wearing skirts, so maybe just don't assume that because you're a woman you like wearing skirts. So ask actually what you want to see. I've seen a couple of fashion sites be like, oh, what is your gender? And I'm like, do you actually want that, or do you want what I'd like to see in my newsletters that you're going to send me incessantly? And then diversity statistics. Sorry, I need to swing my whole body. If you're actually after what is the makeup of your community based off of, are we representing minorities well? Then maybe you should actually be asking, what minorities do you belong to, rather than what is your gender, and therefore building a list of, oh, well, if you are a male, then you're not a minority, and otherwise you are. And so this was from Drupal.org. I actually went on there to find an example of a thing not to do, but they'd actually redesigned it, and I really like this. I'm really glad that they've redesigned it as well. So maybe you actually want ID. Well, passports have 3 genders now. Well, I think they've always had 3 genders, but there's 3 markers that you can pick. You can pick M, F, and X. X is other. But a lot of IDs now are not listing it. The UK government was trying to get rid of the gender marker on your passport before it blew up in the press, and they had to back away or something. I don't know. How does any of this work? And then maybe you actually want my gender, but you want my actual gender, whatever on earth that actually means. And it's complicated because I'm a lot of genders. Even though I only identify as one, I actually have 2, depending on which bit of ID you look at. So my driver's license and my passport, female, even though it's not listed on my driver's license. My New Zealand visa, I built off of my passport, which meant it's also correct. My UK passport isn't, which is going to be fun when I go back to the UK, unless I change it soon. And then my birth certificate isn't either. And so depending on which bit of ID you look at will depend on what my answer is and what bit of ID you're checking. And so what should my answer be? Well, it's going to be female, no matter what. But if you're going to be checking it against other ID, or a form I filled out 10 years ago, because that was when I signed up to vote in the Australian elections, then I have to think about whether or not I'm going to out myself by picking male, or out myself because I'm picking female, or be denied the right to vote because I picked the wrong one, or maybe I just don't pick it and hope. I sat in the Australian consulate in Wellington and was like, oh, shoot, which one of the 2 do I pick? Because the Australian Electoral Commission was something I did before I transitioned, but maybe I'd updated it, I don't remember. So, yeah. Which obviously brings us on to a much more fun topic of actually changing the bloody thing. And so I got really lucky because I decided to move to New Zealand 6 months after I came out, and I had my passport changed already. And so I could build everything off of my passport and get all my ID right, and generally it was pretty good. But when I come back here, I'm still faced with banks that still don't know, and the Australian Electoral Commission and the Australian government, I think. It's it's not the sort of thing you can really phone up and be like, hey, so I'm so-and-so, and what is my gender? And so the actual process for changing it is sometimes very easy, and sometimes, like with the airline I tried to change my title with, I just didn't bother. And I just burnt that account and never touched it again. Because why would I bother doing anything like that? Because it's just going to be a massive hassle. So, gender, like names, they can change, and that's okay. And we need to be building the systems that even if you are recording someone's gender as the passport gender or whatever you pick, you have to make it easy to change, because otherwise people are just going to abandon old accounts or just abandon them completely and start again, because that's easy. Yeah, don't make it hard to change. So that is all I had so I'm sorry it ran really short. I guess I talked really fast. But I'm happy to take questions if people have questions about this sort of stuff, or if they want advice. Yeah. Okay, I can just like run over and lean.
All right, I've got the microphone. We'll deal with that in the break. Can you hear me up the back? Yep. Are there any questions? Thank you for a wonderful talk.
I'll repeat them for the recording.
I was wondering if any particularly good examples come to mind of places that do well at communicating what they need it for when it's not necessarily clear why they would.
So the question was, is there any places that do a particularly good job of communicating why they need the gender? I haven't explicitly looked, and I haven't seen any in my travels that are particularly great examples. I mean, I've seen particularly bad ones, and like as I mentioned earlier, the Drupal.org one was previously pretty bad. It was a drop-down box with like 7 or 8 options, and one of them was transgender, which isn't a gender. One of them was trans woman, which is a gender. I'll give them that, but it also had women, and it was a bit of a mess. But yeah, they got it better, which was good. But I haven't seen any particularly good examples of that.
Hello, we have a microphone again. Good.
First, I just wanted to say thanks for giving the talk. I think it's really important to talk about this kind of stuff, and I think it's really brave of you to do it. It moved me a little bit. I admitted to having a little tear there for a minute. But the question that I wanted to ask was, do you know of any resources on the sort of like product design thing? Like I work at Facebook, and we have a good Transact community within the company, and there's a lot of ways to kind of get ideas or input from people. I'm like, hey, we're designing this product experience, and we want to make sure to do this right. Obviously, not every company or group or software development thing has that kind of resource. Do you know of anything where people can get that kind of input?
Yeah. I would recommend seeking out Rainbow community groups. So in Auckland, there's Rainbow Youth, which does a really good job of trying to keep up to date with like a lot of the new developments, and they put out really good content about like how to deal with this sort of stuff in a respectful way. They're ry.org.nz, I believe. But if you Google Rainbow Youth, it'll come up, I'm sure. But I don't have anything specifically to help with that. Sorry.
That's okay, thanks.
I was going to actually suggest looking at the Pride in Diversity websites in Australia, which tends to provide policy assistance. There's the Human Rights Law Centre, which has a lot of information, and a lot of, like the gender centres will have a bunch of policies and suggested information about how to do that. There's also people who run like gender awareness training in Australia. Most of the ones I know about are Melbourne, because Melbourne's kind of the place that has most of those services in Australia. A lot in New South Wales as well.
Oh, do you want to go to the one?
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for the talk. It was awesome. I have like a really broad stroke societal question for you, which is gender ever relevant to most people? Like on your passport, does anyone ever really need to know? Or like, do we need to label people at birth so we can tell them that they should like dresses, so then we can later tell them that they should buy them from these newsletters?
No. No. And to be honest, no. It's kind of a difficult concept. And to be honest, it's just caused a lot of problems. So, yeah, in an ideal world, it would be just not there. But at the same time, having a gender identity that it's... abolish gender, basically.
You've spent a lot of time talking about examples that look good and defining some terms, and I wanted to know from you what kinds of questions are not good questions to ask people, particularly if someone, for example, comes out to you and tells you they're trans. Do you have any examples of questions that are just not great versus things that are better to ask?
So despite what a lot of people kind of want, the medical side of things is really none of your business. So don't ask questions about that, and don't ask questions about, how, are you taking hormones? Have you had the surgery? Those questions are not really relevant. Good questions to ask are like, what pronouns should I use? Should I use them everywhere? Is there places where I shouldn't use those pronouns? What name do you want to be called? That sort of thing really helps. And just be supportive. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, back.
Hello, thank you for the talk. I was just wondering, from your experience, have you seen any examples of user interfaces which ask about what pronouns you would like to use and then incorporate that into the layout of the interface?
So Facebook's a great example of this. They have, if you set your region to be the US, I believe it is, you get the option of selecting which pronouns you'd like to use, and they have 3, if I remember correctly. I haven't used it in a while, but yeah, you basically select she, her, he, him, or they, them, and it will customize the interface, and it will also customize what other people see. So, like say it's your birthday, the post that will come up will go, wish her a happy birthday, or wish him a happy birthday, or wish them a happy birthday, depending on which one you've picked. So that's a pretty good one. Yeah. Any more? Oh.
Thanks for the talk. It was awesome. I swear it's not a medical question. It's similar. I work with healthcare systems and everything, and it drove me crazy how if you're assigned as a female or male at birth, you are supposed to have a certain set of organs in your body and everything else is a fraud. Do you know any company, any insurance company, any country that is doing better? Because every time I push for that, they say, no one does that, it's too hard, its protocol is already like that.
I don't, but I have a good story of a company that really did that. So I was getting in health insurance, and so I signed up as a woman, and then they talked to my doctor, and they were like, oh, no, you're actually a man. And then they called me up and tried to explain this to me. And I'm going, tell me more about how my plumbing is different, or like what. And so it was an experience. It wasn't a particularly pleasant one, I'll give you that. But no, it was. Yeah, I haven't seen anyone do it particularly well. And one of the things you mentioned was that there is this boxes of male and female, and so a lot of, well, when you have certain intersex conditions, so intersex is this, you don't fit into the binary of male, female, what are the words I'm looking for? You don't fit into that binary idea of what is male and what is female, and so that can also cause a lot of problems because you'll either be assigned one and actually be the other, or have all these sorts of things happen. And so I don't think I haven't found any good examples, unfortunately. But it's getting better. I think it's getting better.
I have a question, but I'll start with a little anecdote. In one of the previous jobs when I was in Finland, which has great pronoun han, same for everybody, go Finland, I had to convert a user database to a system that required a gender. And so I had to guess. Some names were easy to guess, others were not so. I did a Google search, and it would show me pictures of horses and dogs.
Good start.
The question is, when you're in this position where you're a provider of a system for somebody else, for another organization, how do you convince them to change their ways?
I don't have a lot of experience in convincing people that certain things are a good idea, mostly because that requires a lot of spoons, and I don't have a lot of spoons. I guess the thing is that if you could explain that you don't actually use this information, or if there's a better way of storing this information, like if you're talking about certain, if you're storing male and female and thus changing the pronouns, then maybe don't store the male female, just store pronouns, and then that then saves you the conversion of having to figure out whether one or the other, and it also makes life a bit better for everyone else. I don't have a lot of experience with the organizational change stuff, sorry. Yeah.
We've got time for one more question.
So we live in this gendered world. So now I run a program called the Girls Programming Network, where we teach girls and gender diverse children to code, and all our tutors are women or gender diverse people. But I have a hard time advertising to get more tutors on board because I'm not sure what language to use, because we have a problem with gender diversity in technology, which is a lot like gender diverse. So I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place in terms of just the words, because I say I want gender diverse tutors and they go, oh, well, I'm a man and I'm a person who has a gender, I'd like to be involved. How can I include all the people I want to include?
I'm glad you are having that problem and not me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, I get stuck when I'm like, well, I want women and transgender people, but then they go, we're women as well. I'm like, of course you are. So I go, women and transgender men and non-binary people, and then I go, but do you include transgender women? But I'm like, of course I included you and women, but they don't know me personally, so it's hard.
So I don't have a good answer, but things I've seen that I've quite liked are things like women and cis women. As like and we're also including the cis people here as well as a like a not exact not calling out, you know, oh, we were also trans people are kind of tacked on the end,
Yes.
but it's like cis people are tacked on the end. Yeah, I have a good answer.
I just want to say no cis men allowed, but it seems rather mean.
I mean, that could work.
It would.
I mean, just like cis men, brackets, exclamation mark, or not, depending on which language you're using.
Yeah, it is super important to be clear when you're creating a space like that, whether you want people who are all the way out or people who are just not totally certain that they're cis, because there are a lot of, there's a lot of kind of time for a lot of people between when they're like, I might not actually be the gender that everyone has told me I am, and when they're okay with presenting as not looking like a dude in a diverse space. So think about that part of people's journeys when you figure out how to message it and whether you want people in your space when they're at that stage.
Yeah. Okay, awesome.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you, Opal. Thank you.